Welcome. This is Jean Eaton of Information Managers. It is my honor and pleasure to be with you today at the Practice Management Nuggets. This is a weekly interview series with practice managers, healthcare providers, or trusted vendors who support healthcare practices. Our topics help primary healthcare practice managers, healthcare providers, and owners to implement, maintain, or improve their business and practice administration so that healthcare providers can focus on providing quality healthcare services. I am your host, Jean Eaton, the Practice Management Mentor with Information Managers. This week, our guest is Jeff Grandfield. The Lease Coach is America's #1 authority on lease negotiating for tenants since 1993, successfully negotiating over 1,200 tenant leases across North America. Jeff Grandfield has been a commercial lease consultant with the Lease Coach since 2005, and he frequently speaks at healthcare conferences and franchise shows across North America, as well as writing numerous articles for various industry magazines, and is the co-author for Negotiating Commercial Leases and Renewals for Dummies. So I'd like to introduce Jeff Grandfield and say, Jeff, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Jean. Very happy to be on the line.
Oh, we're delighted to have you here. I had the opportunity to hear you when you were doing a training session for the Edmonton Business Link. And at that time, I learned so much about leasing that I did not know, that I knew I had to have you on the show and share your valuable information with my clients and listeners.
Yeah, well, I'm great to be here as well, and hopefully we can get as much information as we can. One of the challenges when we're speaking to tenants on this topic is always trying to get enough information, because tenants realize there's so much that they don't know when they start getting into this process and start hearing about all the factors they have to look at. So I'm always excited to share that information and answer questions for tenants on this topic.
And that's fantastic. We're so busy doing the business of what we need, our passion is, that looking after some of these other details like leases is probably not something that we've had a lot of experience with. So it's great to know that we've got experts in the communities that can help us. So Jeff, tell us your story. How did you get involved in managing leases?
Well, as you touched on the opening, the Lease Coach has been around since 1993, working exclusively for tenants all across North America. We're regular speakers at shows, seminars, publications and magazines. My partner and I co-authoring the Negotiating Commercial Leases and Renewals for Dummies. This is something that, over 10 years ago I got involved in and just really liked the industry of real estate and really loved the idea of working for tenants who, in my opinion, are kind of the underdog in this industry. The average tenant negotiates a lease maybe 1, 2, 3 times in their career. And at the Lease Coach, our goal is to level the playing field for the tenant. We want to come in there and help them through this process, because the average tenant, practice manager, doctor just is not equipped or just doesn't have the experience or desire to go through this process and ensure they don't leave anything on the negotiating table. And that's challenging when they're up against professionals that are either professional landlords, professional leasing property managers, professional real estate agents. So at the Lease Coach, our goal is to really help the tenants through that process and making sure they're getting the best deal and getting into the best situation for their business or practice.
And I had access to the book, the Leasing for Dummies, and I found lots of great information in it. And one of the things that I know we want to talk on today is about negotiating or renegotiating your current lease. I didn't even know that was something that was really something you could do. So I'm really looking forward to having you share that information with us today.
Well, absolutely. And our goal at the Lease Coach, we do everything from helping tenants that are dealing with their first lease, going through this the very first time, not knowing when to start, how to approach this, what to do, dealing with lease renewals. So often tenants think that's going to be a straightforward process and just going, well, don't I just, sign here, do this? And even helping tenants that are in the middle of a lease agreement renegotiate the terms, because sometimes things change in your business or your practice, and it may be the rental rate, it may be the term. All of these things can be dealt with if handled the right way.
And I've got so many questions to ask you, but the first, most important question, if you could tell the listeners, our current or future tenants, only one thing what would that be? What would be your number one tip if they can't listen to the rest of the seminar? What should they do?
This is always a tough question to ask, and I get asked this once in a while. What's the most important thing? What should I know about leasing, negotiating my lease? And it's so hard to pick the one key thing, but when I look at this and give thought to it, I really think the biggest tip or mistake that tenants make is you need to give yourself enough time to go through this process. And it doesn't matter if you're dealing with a new lease, with a lease renewal, trying to renegotiate the terms of your existing lease. These situations are going to take longer than you expect in almost every case. This is one of those situations where we say Murphy's Law applies. If anything can go wrong, it will go wrong, and it will go wrong at the absolute worst time. So when we're looking at dealing with new leases, for example, we're recommending to our clients giving yourself at least 6 months, and we say at least 6 months, to go through the process of looking for a location to when you want to see the doors open for your practice or your business. And why we say that is that if you're looking at opening a new location, you've got to look at the site selection process, evaluating what locations can work for you, going through, visiting sites, evaluating which ones are going to be better for your business. But you also have to go through the negotiation process of the basic business terms, negotiate the offer to lease, the lease renewal. There's a lot of negotiation that goes on through this process as well, and that can take weeks or even months. And beyond that, when you think you've got the location picked, the terms negotiated, lease signed, you still have to plan for permits for building out your location, time to actually build out your location, getting your place up and going. So before you know it, 6 months can go by in the blink of an eye. When you're dealing with a lease renewal, for any of the listeners on the line that have existing leases, we recommend that you give yourself at least 9 to 12 months at a minimum before your lease is expiring to deal with your lease renewal. And a lot of people say, well, why longer? We've already got our space built out. Well, there's a couple key reasons for this. Is that one, maybe you're considering relocating and you need time to go out and do that site selection, negotiate a new deal, build out the new location. But the other biggest reason is whether you're planning to relocate or planning to stay and renew your lease is that most lease agreements will have in there, if you have a renewal option clause, it will say you can exercise this renewal option for another 3, 5, 10 years, but you have to give notice by a certain date. And it's usually 6 months before it expires, sometimes 9 months, sometimes 12 months. You want to give yourself at least 3 months before that renewal trigger so that you can negotiate with your landlord and find out what their expectations are. The last thing you want to do is find out either right before your lease expires or after you've exercised your renewal option that your landlord plans to double your rent, or something else is happening that you need to deal with. So you really have to plan far enough in advance so you can negotiate with your landlord before you have to pull that renewal trigger.
That's an important piece to be able to recognize that things always take longer than you expect them to, and you might be ready earlier to make the decisions that you need to make, but that doesn't mean that everybody else is lined up and ready to on your timeline.
That's right. There's a lot of pieces of the puzzle that have to fall into place going through this, and this is a process, as I said. It's not something that happens overnight. It takes time.
This is Jean Eaton with Information Managers, your practice management mentor. Thanking you for joining us today, and I look forward to having you join us for our upcoming events. Stay tuned.